Hey everybody, Marcus here. In answering life's most difficult questions, we often find ourselves hitting certain roadblocks. For example, as far as belief in God is concerned, there are many who are open to the idea and would happily choose to believe if only they could have some clear evidence by the standards of physical evidence. Now, I've spoken to a number of people who have had very strange experiences in their lives. These experiences have radically shifted their belief system about one thing or another in a direction that would seem kooky and insane to those who have not had those experiences. For example, I have a friend who recounts a story to me of an experience he had that sounds very much akin to accounts you hear about people who claim to have encountered aliens. Now, my friend was very cautious not to make the value judgment himself when recounting the story. He reasserted over and over that he is not saying what he experienced was aliens, but merely describing a set of physical occurrences that easily lend itself to such an explanation. Not only was he very cautious about how he phrased his story, but you could clearly tell he was not overly excited about telling it. Now, I suspect he had a need to be believed. I have another friend who told me a story about what had transpired after his father's death. Apparently, the day after his father's death, he had a visit from him in his home. They had a short conversation, much like one would have with any living person, and then the father left the room and vanished. A third acquaintance recounted possessing memories about things preceding his own birth. He claimed his memories were confirmed by people in his family who were present at the events to which the memories apply. In all three of these cases, these men each have only the one strange story. They're completely rational and normal people. They're not conspiracy theorists. But sure as hell, no one will convince them that the things they experienced were weather balloons or hallucinations. On the subject of their experience, they will not be budged. They were not interested in convincing me what they said was true. They could care less whether or not I accepted it as true. They merely mentioned it as part of their own biography. Now, what if there indeed was a way to come to possess an experience which in turn should suffice to convince you of the existence of God? Would you take it? What I'm about to read are excerpts from a book entitled Hostage to the Devil by a Catholic priest named Malachi Martin. Now, Father Martin had served as an exorcist in the Roman Catholic Church for 30 years. His book speaks of 5 specific exorcisms that he thought were particularly revealing as to the nature of possession. In addition to the case studies, he offers some interesting insights into possession and the life of an exorcist. Now, whether or not you believe Father Martin is a charlatan makes little difference, as there is a mechanism for you to verify the truth of the matter, if only you are willing to do so. In his book, Father Martin mentions that in any given exorcism, there are 2 priests and 3 non-clergy helpers. If a man were to set his mind to it, he could do his best to try and fill the role of one of those 3 non-clergy helpers during an exorcism. If indeed what Father Martin says is true, then such an experience should conclusively clear up any doubt as to the existence of demons at the minimum. However, if indeed demons are real, and the Catholic priest seems to have the power to expel them, there would not be a huge leap in reason to come to believe that the rest of the Catholic story must have some truth in it. Now, there's one more interesting thing that Father Martin mentions. He says that these days, priests are scared to become exorcists. They're scared because the life of an exorcist does not usually last more than 10 to 15 years after they begin to exorcise demons. Though he himself had been an exorcist for 30 years, he says that such a lifespan is near unheard of in his line of work. Either way, whether or not you believe a word of what is spoken, there's a lot of benefit in listening to it. If for no other reason, you will have a cool story to tell at parties, or a cool ghost story to tell when you go camping. Now, I'm going to put out 3 videos on the subject, as there's too much information for one video. The 3 videos in the series will be on the following topics. This video will be on how possession occurs. The next video will be on how possession is detected and what a typical exorcist looks like. The final video will probably be the most interesting. It will focus on what happens in an exorcism. So, let's get started. Originally an archangel, Lucifer led a rebellion in disobedience to God and, with his legions of companion angels, was condemned outright by God to hell. In their state of eternal separation from their Creator, these creatures have always been known as demons. These demons are what possess the living. If to disbelieve is to be disarmed, the reverse is equally true. Given the general conditions that surround us in our present society, it becomes all the more important to realize that even in the worst conditions, no person can be possessed without some degree of cooperation on his or her part. It is extremely important to be aware of at least some of the factors that are likely to facilitate collaboration between a possessing demon and the possessed. The effective cause of possession is the voluntary collaboration of an individual, through his faculties of mind and will, with one or more of those bodiless, genderless creatures called demons. While there are no causes of demonic possession that can be physically dissected or otherwise reduced to our currently shrunken laboratory standards of objectivity, it is and always has been both possible and necessary to speak of those causes with theological accuracy. Demonic possession is not a static condition, an unchanging state, nor does one become possessed suddenly, the way one might break an arm or catch the measles. Rather, possession is an ongoing process, a process that affects the two faculties of the soul, the mind, by which an individual receives and internalizes knowledge, and the will, by which an individual chooses to act upon that knowledge. Ample experience with the possessed has clearly demonstrated that there are certain identifiable factors that dispose an individual to collaboration in mind and will with a possessing demon. The presence of such disposing factors in a person's life does not in itself portend that the person will surely one day be numbered among the possessed. At the same time, and with only rare exceptions in my experience, one or several of these disposing factors are operational in genuine cases of possession. Some of the most common disposing factors have been with us for a long time, while others are of more recent vintage. Some are in the nature of instruments outside the individual, the Ouija board, for example, and the spiritual seance. Others are in the nature of attitudes, whether taught or self-learned, that are interiorized by the person. Transcendental meditation and the anagram method are two of the most prominent in this category. In the context of possession, all disposing factors produce within a person a condition of those two faculties of soul, mind, and will that is most aptly described as an aspiring vacuum. A vacuum, because there is created an absence of clearly defined and humanly acceptable concepts for the mind. Aspiring, because there is a corresponding absence of clearly defined and humanly acceptable goals for the will. In the case of the Ouija board, or that of the seance, or transcendental meditation, or the anagram method, the participants must dispose themselves precisely with a view to being opened up, to becoming desirous and accepting of whatever happens along. The very term Ouija, for example, is a display of this opening up, for the term is composed of the French and German words oui and ja, for yes. The attitude of the participant in Ouija is literally yes, yes. The mind is to be made receptive to whatever suggestions or concepts are presented. If participants also dispose their wills to accept those concepts and act on them, then the predisposing circuit is complete. The aspiring vacuum is operative and is powerful enough to flood the mind with appropriate concepts that can make a bid for the will's assent. Often enough, the mind and the will are opened up in precisely this fashion in view of possession. Among the vast array of disposing factors likely to lead to possession, the anagram method is nowadays far and away the most common and pernicious. Given the general state of religion, it is not surprising that the method's popularity is enormously enhanced by its having been enthusiastically adopted and propagated by Catholic theologians and teachers from the major religious orders, Jesuit, Dominican, and Franciscan, and by some of the official organs used by the bishops of the United States and Canada charged with teaching religious doctrine to young and adult Catholics. Moreover, because the anagram method is currently presented as an authorized teaching of the North American Forum on the Catechumenate, the body that supplies to the parishes and dioceses of the United States and Canada precisely those materials intended to bring communities and individuals to maturity of faith, the method penetrates the full fabric of religious belief and participation, literally from cradle to grave. So effective has the anagram method become in strangling genuine Catholic faith that it is now considered by some as the most lethal threat to date in the campaign being waged to liquidate Orthodox Catholic belief among the faithful. True to its name, anagram means 9 points, or marks. The anagram is a 9-pointed mandala-type figure within a circle. The mandala character of the anagram is meant to represent the lotus and, as described by Swiss psychologist Carl Jung, is a symbol depicting the endeavor to reunite the self. The anagram came to the West from a now dead Asiatic spiritual master, George Ivanovich Gurdjieff. Gurdjieff claimed in turn that it originated with the Sufi masters of Islam. It reached the United States via spiritual teachers in Chile, Bolivia, and Peru, and in the early 1970s was first broadcast here from the Esalen Institute in Big Sur, California, and Loyola University in Chicago. There's now abundant literature on the subject. According to Enneagram teaching, there are exactly 9 types of human personalities, each of which is represented by one of the 9 points of the Enneagram figure. Each human being is inalterably confined to one and only one of those personality types. But within his or her type, each person is infinitely self-perfectible. 2 characteristics of the Enneagram method comprise moral teachings that are irreconcilable with the basic moral teachings of Catholics in particular, and Christians in general. The basic presumption presented to the mind by the Enneagram method is that each individual is self-perfectible, morally speaking, within that individual's personality type. This presumption is in reality a late revival of an ancient heresy known as Pelagianism. It is at odds with the basic Christian teaching that we absolutely depend on the action of divine grace for all moral perfection. Of ourselves, we are helpless. Not only are we not infinitely self-perfectible, we will never of ourselves even escape the grip of our own sinful nature. Only supernatural grace enables us to do that, and that grace is simply gratuitous on God's part. The teaching of the Enneagram method cuts both God and His grace out of the loop. In fact, there is no longer any loop at all. The individual is cut off from effective knowledge of his or her dependence on God and His supernatural grace for ultimate perfection. He or she is confined to an inalterable personality type, which has been laid out by Enneagram masters. The second faulty moral characteristic of the Enneagram method completes the damage caused by the first. Having fatalistically accepted one's own category, the participant is dependent for perfection on the enneagrammatic exercises suitable for one's own personality type. In other words, the soul of the Enneagram disciple is opened out and made docile, with the goal of receiving the promised self-knowledge congruent with his or her type. The soul becomes an apt and classic receptor, an aspiring vacuum, ready for the approach of an intending possessor. In such a setting, the intending possessor may come as what St. Paul described with dramatic precision as an angel of light. But the danger is all the more insidious for that, for in such a situation, the condition commonly called perfect possession may be the result. As the term implies, a victim of perfect possession is absolutely controlled by evil and gives no outward indication, no hint whatsoever of the demonic residing within. He or she will not cringe, as others who are possessed will, at the sight of such religious symbols as a crucifix or a rosary. The perfectly possessed will not brittle at the touch of holy water, nor hesitate to discuss religious topics with equanimity. If convicted of crimes against the law, such a victim will frequently acknowledge guilt and even the moral badness of the acts committed. More often than not, such a person will petition that his physical life be forfeited, that he be executed for his crimes. Thus, in his own way, he voices the insistent Satanist preference for death over life, and the fixated desire to join the prince in his kingdom. Because there is no will left to call the victim's own, and because some part of the victim's will is necessary for any hope of successful exorcism, remedy is unlikely to succeed even in the event the possession should somehow be uncovered and verified as the problem. In the next video, we will talk about how possession is detected and what the profile of an exorcist looks like. To add a little food for thought in the MGTOW context, considering women are more open than men to the New Age spirituality cults, if indeed possession is real, then surely it would be a majority of women who would succumb to it. But for now, thanks for listening. Go team.